The music had stopped. The mansion was silent. And in the darkness of his bedroom at Graceland, Elvis Presley was talking to someone who had been dead for 42 years. His voice was barely a whisper, but the words were desperate, pleading, almost like a prayer. "Jesse, I don't know how much longer I can do this." Nobody else was in the room. Nobody else had ever been in the room during these conversations. Because the person Elvis was talking to had died 35 minutes before Elvis himself was born, his identical twin brother, Jesse Garon Presley. And this wasn't the first time Elvis had spoken to him. It was a ritual that had haunted the king of rock and roll since childhood, a secret he carried like a ghost, chained to his soul. January 8, 1935. A small two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi. Gladys Presley was in labor, screaming in pain as the midwife worked frantically. The first baby came at 4:30 a.m., stillborn. A tiny, perfectly formed boy who never took a breath. They wrapped him in a blanket and set him aside. 35 minutes later, the second baby arrived. Alive. Crying. Fighting. They named the dead one Jesse Garon. They named the living one Elvis Aaron. But in that moment, something happened that nobody could explain. As Gladys held her living son, she looked at the tiny body of the one who didn't make it, and she wept not just with grief, but with something else. Guilt, relief, confusion. How do you celebrate a birth when there's a death in the same breath? How do you raise a child knowing his twin is in a grave? Elvis learned about Jesse when he was old enough to understand death but too young to process it. He was maybe 4 or 5 years old. Gladys took him to the cemetery where Jesse was buried in an unmarked grave at Priceville Cemetery. She knelt down, held Elvis's small hand, and told him, "You had a brother. He's in heaven now, but he's always watching over you." Elvis stared at the patch of ground, trying to imagine what his brother looked like. Did he look like Elvis? Would they have been best friends? Would they have sung together? Even as a child, Elvis felt something heavy settle on his chest, a weight that would never lift. He wasn't just Elvis. He was Elvis, the one who lived, the one who got the chance, the one who survived. As Elvis grew up, his mother's words echoed constantly. "Jesse is watching over you. Jesse is with you always. You were meant to live for both of you." Gladys didn't mean it as pressure. She meant it as comfort. But to a young boy, it became something else, a responsibility, a debt. If Jesse was watching, then Elvis had to make his life count for two. He had to be successful enough for both of them. He had to live loudly enough, brightly enough, fully enough for two souls. And so, somewhere in his childhood, Elvis started talking to Jesse. At first, it was simple. Whispers at night. "Good night, Jesse. I hope you're okay up there." But as Elvis got older, the conversations became more complex, more desperate. By the time Elvis was a teenager, struggling with poverty, trying to figure out who he was, the conversations with Jesse became a lifeline. He would sit alone in his room, strum his guitar, and talk to the brother he never met. "Do you think I can really be a singer, Jesse? Do you think people will like me?" There was never an answer, of course. But Elvis felt something, a presence, a sense that he wasn't completely alone. Some people might call it imagination. Some might call it coping. But to Elvis, it was real. Jesse was real. Not as a ghost, not as a haunting, but as a part of him. The missing piece. The other half. But what Elvis didn't tell anyone, not even his mother, was that sometimes he felt like Jesse answered. Not in words, but in feelings, in moments of clarity, in decisions that seemed to come from somewhere outside himself. When Elvis walked into Sun Records in 1953 to record My Happiness as a gift for his mother, he felt Jesse with him. When he signed with RCA in 1955, when he performed on The Ed Sullivan Show, when he became the biggest star in the world, he felt Jesse there, watching, guiding, or maybe judging. Because with every success came a question Elvis couldn't escape. Why me? Why did I get to live and you didn't? The fame came fast, too fast. By 1956, Elvis Presley was a global phenomenon. Screaming fans, sold-out shows, movie contracts, money. But with the fame came something else: loneliness. Because no matter how many people surrounded him, no matter how many fans screamed his name, Elvis felt like nobody really understood him. Nobody except Jesse. And so, the conversations continued. In hotel rooms after concerts, Elvis would sit by the window, look at the night sky, and whisper, "I did it, Jesse. I made it. But I don't know if it's what I wanted." There was no response, just silence. But Elvis kept talking. In 1964, during the filming of Viva Las Vegas, the director found Elvis alone in his trailer, staring at a photograph of his pregnant mother. She was smiling, one hand on her belly, unaware that one of the babies she carried would never breathe. Elvis looked up with tears in his eyes and asked, "Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if one decision had been different?" The director didn't understand, but Elvis did. He was wondering what his life would have been like if Jesse had survived, and he hadn't. His father, Vernon, noticed the conversations once. It was 1957, backstage in Memphis. Vernon opened Elvis's dressing room door and heard him talking to the mirror. "Jesse, you should see them out there. Thousands of people. But I feel more alone than I did in Tupelo." Vernon closed the door quietly and never spoke of it. Some secrets were too painful to acknowledge, but what happened next would shock everyone who thought they knew Elvis. Gladys Presley died on August 14, 1958, while Elvis was serving in the army in Germany. He was devastated. Gladys had been his anchor, his protector, his biggest fan. And when she died, Elvis felt like he lost the only person who understood the weight he carried, the weight of living for two. At her funeral, Elvis broke down completely. He threw himself on her casket, sobbing uncontrollably, begging her not to leave him. Witnesses said they'd never seen a man cry like that. It was as if his soul was being ripped out of his body. But in his grief, something else happened. He felt Jesse more strongly than ever before. It was as if losing his mother brought him closer to his twin. Because now they had something in common. They both knew death. After Gladys's death, the conversations with Jesse changed. They became darker, more intense. Elvis would talk to Jesse not just about success, but about failure, about fear, about the emptiness that fame couldn't fill. "Jesse, I'm so tired. I don't know who I am anymore. Am I Elvis Presley, or am I just playing him?" The weight of survivor's guilt grew heavier. Elvis started asking himself questions he couldn't answer. Did I take your life? Did I steal the air you were supposed to breathe? Is that why I'm here and you're not? These thoughts haunted him. They kept him awake at night. They made him reach for pills to sleep, pills to wake up, pills to perform, pills to feel human. The pills started innocently enough. Army doctors prescribed them for exhaustion. Hollywood doctors prescribed them for energy. Vegas doctors prescribed them for everything in between. But the pills weren't just masking physical pain. They were masking the guilt of being the one who lived, the guilt of having everything Jesse never got to experience. And every time Elvis swallowed another pill, he was trying to quiet the voice in his head that asked, "Why you? Why not him?" Elvis tried other ways to find peace. In the mid-1960s, he became obsessed with spiritual books. He read everything he could find about reincarnation, the afterlife, twin souls, and supernatural connections. His library at Graceland was filled with books by Paramahansa Yogananda, Khalil Gibran, and various texts on metaphysics and spiritualism. He was searching for proof that Jesse still existed somewhere, that the bond between twins transcended death, that all those conversations weren't just one-sided. Larry Geller, Elvis's hairstylist and spiritual advisor, remembered Elvis asking him late one night in 1965, "Do you think twins have one soul split into two bodies? And if one dies, does the soul become whole again in the one who survived?" Larry didn't have an answer. Nobody did. But Elvis kept searching. He attended seances. He consulted psychics. He meditated for hours, trying to feel Jesse's presence. Some people called it obsession. Elvis called it hope. When Elvis married Priscilla in 1967, he tried to stop talking to Jesse. He thought maybe having a wife, building a family, would fill the void. But on their wedding night, alone in the bathroom of their suite at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, Elvis looked at himself in the mirror and whispered, "I'm sorry, Jesse. I'm trying to move on." But he couldn't, because Jesse wasn't something he could leave behind. Jesse was part of him, woven into his DNA, embedded in his soul. The Memphis Mafia, Elvis's inner circle of friends and bodyguards, had their own theories about Jesse. Red West, one of Elvis's oldest friends, once said he'd heard Elvis talking to himself late at night during tours. At first, he thought Elvis was rehearsing lyrics or talking on the phone. But one night in 1971, after a show in Lake Tahoe, Red walked past Elvis's hotel room and heard him clearly. "Jesse, do you think they still love me? Or are they just here for the show?" Red never mentioned it to Elvis. He knew better. Some things were too personal, too sacred to question. But he told the other guys, and they all agreed. Elvis wasn't talking to himself. He was talking to his twin. Joe Esposito, another member of the Memphis Mafia, remembered a conversation from 1972. They were flying back from a tour, and Elvis was staring out the airplane window into the darkness. Joe asked if he was okay. Elvis turned to him and said, "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Like you're just filling space that was meant for someone else?" Joe didn't understand at the time. But years later, after Elvis died, he realized Elvis wasn't talking about fame or fortune. He was talking about Jesse. And when Lisa Marie was born in 1968, Elvis felt the weight grow even heavier. Now he wasn't just living for himself and Jesse. He was responsible for another life. A daughter who would never know her uncle. Elvis held Lisa Marie in the hospital and whispered to her, "You have an uncle in heaven. His name is Jesse. He's watching over you too." Priscilla heard him and felt her heart break, because in that moment, she realized Elvis would never be free from Jesse. The ghost would always be there. As Lisa Marie grew older, she would catch her father standing alone in empty rooms, talking to no one. When she was 5, she asked him, "Daddy, who are you talking to?" Elvis knelt down, looked into her eyes, and said, "My brother, your Uncle Jesse. He didn't get to stay with us, but he's always here." Lisa Marie asked, "Where is he?" Elvis touched his chest. "Here. He lives here. And this is where everything changed." By the early 1970s, Elvis's career was struggling. The movies had flopped. The music felt stale. He was performing the same songs in Las Vegas, night after night, feeling like a caricature of himself. And the conversations with Jesse became more desperate. "What am I supposed to do, Jesse? How do I keep going? I'm living for both of us, but I don't even know if I'm living at all." One night in 1974, after a particularly rough show in Las Vegas, Elvis locked himself in his dressing room and broke down. He was exhausted, overweight, addicted to prescription pills, and for the first time, he asked Jesse the question he'd been avoiding his entire life. "Would you have been better at this than me? Would you have been stronger?" There was no answer. There never was. But in that moment, Elvis realized something. He wasn't talking to Jesse because Jesse was there. He was talking to Jesse because Elvis needed him to be there. Because the idea of Jesse gave Elvis permission to be vulnerable, to admit weakness, to say out loud all the things he couldn't say to anyone else. Jesse wasn't a ghost. Jesse was a mirror, a reflection of all the fear, doubt, and pain that Elvis couldn't face alone. And maybe that was the point. Maybe that was why Elvis kept talking to him. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, knew about Jesse. Everyone who was close to Elvis knew. But Parker saw it differently. To him, Jesse was a distraction, a weakness. In 1975, During a heated argument about Elvis's declining health and erratic performances, Parker snapped, "You're killing yourself, Elvis. And for what? For a brother who never even lived?" Elvis went silent. His face turned pale. For a moment, it looked like he might explode. But instead, he just walked out of the room. That was the closest Parker ever came to acknowledging the elephant in the room, the ghost that Elvis carried everywhere. And it was the last time Parker ever mentioned Jesse's name. Priscilla had noticed the conversations years earlier. She never said anything at first, thinking it was just Elvis being eccentric. But one night in 1972, shortly before their divorce, she walked into their bedroom and found Elvis sitting on the edge of the bed, talking to the air. "I know, Jesse. I know I messed it up. I always mess it up." Priscilla stood in the doorway, watching. And for the first time, she understood. Elvis wasn't crazy. He was carrying a grief so deep, so old, that it had become part of who he was. She walked over, sat beside him, and gently took his hand. "Elvis, Jesse would be proud of you." Elvis looked at her with tears in his eyes and whispered, "How do you know? He never got the chance to be anything." That moment broke something in Elvis, because Priscilla was right. Jesse never got the chance to be anything. He never got to sing. He never got to fall in love. He never got to make mistakes or have regrets. He never got to live. And Elvis had spent his entire life feeling guilty for something that wasn't his fault. He didn't steal Jesse's life. He didn't take anything from him. He was born. That's all. But survivor's guilt doesn't care about logic. It doesn't care about fairness. It only cares about the question, why me? But you haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. By 1975, Elvis was spiraling. The pills were taking over. His weight was ballooning. His performances were erratic. And the conversations with Jesse became less like comfort and more like torment. One night, alone at Graceland, Elvis walked into the meditation garden where his mother was buried. He stood there in the dark, looking at her grave, and for the first time in his life, he asked Jesse to leave. "I can't do this anymore, Jesse. I can't carry you with me. I can't live for both of us. I need to let you go." He stood there waiting for something, a sign, a feeling, anything. But there was nothing, just silence. And in that silence, Elvis felt something shift. Not relief, not peace, but something close to it. Acceptance. But letting go wasn't that simple. Because even though Elvis wanted to move on, the weight of Jesse's death had shaped everything about him. His need to perform, his fear of failure, his inability to say no to people, his generosity that bordered on self-destruction. All of it traced back to that one thought: I have to be enough for two. In 1976, during a recording session at Graceland in the Jungle Room, Elvis broke down in the middle of singing "Hurt." The lyrics hit too close to home. "I hurt myself today to see if I still feel." He stopped mid-song, put down the microphone, and walked out. The producers found him in his bedroom talking to himself, or rather, talking to Jesse. "I'm so tired of hurting. I'm so tired of feeling like I'm not enough." And by 1977, Elvis was exhausted. He was 42 years old, the same number of years Jesse had been dead. Some people close to Elvis said he fixated on that number. 42, half of 84. The age twins should reach together, but only one of them made it, and that one was falling apart. In the weeks leading up to his death, Elvis's conversations with Jesse became more frequent, more desperate. His girlfriend at the time, Ginger Alden, would wake up in the middle of the night and find Elvis's side of the bed empty. She'd find him in the bathroom or in the den, sitting in the dark, talking softly. "I'm ready, Jesse. I'm so tired. If you're out there, if you're real, give me a sign. Let me know it's okay to let go." On the night of August 15th, 1977, just hours before Elvis would die, he walked to the meditation garden at Graceland and spoke to Jesse one last time. "I hope I did you proud, brother. I hope I lived enough for both of us." Ginger found him there, crying in the dark. She asked if he was okay. Elvis wiped his tears and said, "I will be. Soon." On August 16, 1977, when Elvis collapsed in the bathroom at Graceland and took his last breath, some people said he finally got to meet Jesse, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as an equal, two brothers, face to face, for the first time. The truth is, we'll never know if Elvis really believed Jesse was with him, or if it was just a coping mechanism for the unbearable weight of survivor's guilt. But what we do know is this: Elvis Presley spent his entire life talking to someone who never got to answer. And maybe that's the saddest part of the story. Not that Jesse died, but that Elvis never stopped mourning him, never stopped feeling like he owed him something, never stopped asking, "Why me?" Wait a minute, don't miss this detail. There's one more piece to this story that most people don't know. In Elvis's will, he left instructions for his burial. He wanted to be laid to rest in the meditation garden at Graceland, right next to his mother. But there's a detail in his private notes, something he wrote years earlier, that was never made public. He wanted a marker placed in the garden, not for himself, for Jesse. A plaque that simply read, "Jesse Garon Presley, born January 8, 1935. Died January 8, 1935. Forever with his brother." Elvis never got to place that marker while he was alive. But after his death, his family did. And today, if you visit Graceland and walk through the meditation garden, you can see it. A small bronze plaque tucked beside the graves of Elvis and Gladys. Jesse's name, finally acknowledged, finally remembered. Some fans say that Elvis's connection to Jesse explains everything. His loneliness, his generosity, his need to be loved by everyone because he felt like he was living on borrowed time. Others say it's just a tragic footnote in a larger story of fame, addiction, and early death. But maybe the truth is somewhere in between. Maybe Elvis really did feel Jesse with him. Maybe he really did talk to him every night. Or maybe Elvis created Jesse as a way to make sense of the guilt he carried. A way to explain the emptiness that fame could never fill. Either way, the result is the same. Elvis Presley spent his entire life haunted by a brother he never knew. A brother who died before he could take his first breath. And in the end, that might be the most human thing about him. You won't believe this, but the story doesn't end with Elvis's death. Because even after he died, people claimed to feel his presence at Graceland. Tour guides, visitors, even staff members reported hearing music late at night, seeing shadows in empty rooms, feeling like someone was watching them. And some people believe it's not Elvis haunting Graceland. It's Jesse, still watching over his brother, still waiting, still there. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's something undeniably haunting about the idea. Two brothers, separated by 35 minutes and 42 years, finally reunited in the place they both called home. But let's talk about what this story really means. Because at its core, this isn't just a story about Elvis and Jesse. It's a story about survivor's guilt, about the weight of living when someone else didn't get the chance. It's a story that resonates with anyone who has ever lost someone and wondered, why am I still here? It's a story about grief that never heals, guilt that never fades, and love that transcends death. And maybe that's why Elvis's connection to Jesse is so powerful. Because it reminds us that we all carry ghosts. We all have conversations with people who aren't there anymore. We all wonder if we're doing enough with the life we were given. Elvis Presley was many things. A singer, a performer, an icon, a rebel, a son, a father, a husband. But before he was any of those things, he was a twin. The one who lived, the one who carried the weight of two souls in one body. And maybe that's the real story of Elvis. Not the fame, not the music, not the movies, but the burden of being the one who survived, the one who had to make it count, the one who spent his entire life trying to answer a question that had no answer. Why me and not you, Jesse? What you're seeing now is nothing compared to this, because the final twist in this story is the simplest and the most heartbreaking. In all the biographies, All the documentaries, all the interviews with people who knew Elvis, one detail is almost always mentioned. Elvis never celebrated his birthday. January 8th was never a day of joy for him. Because it wasn't just his birthday. It was Jesse's birthday, too. And it was Jesse's death day. So every year, instead of celebrating, Elvis mourned. He would visit Jesse's grave if he could. He would light a candle. He would sit in silence. And he would whisper the same thing he'd been whispering since he was a child. "Happy birthday, Jesse. I'm still here. I'm still trying." And maybe that's the legacy of Jesse Garon Presley. Not that he died, but that he lived on in his brother. In every song Elvis sang, in every stage he walked onto, in every moment of doubt and every burst of confidence. Jesse was there, not as a ghost, not as a haunting, but as a presence, a shadow, a twin who never breathed but somehow never left. And when Elvis took his last breath on August 16th, 1977, maybe, just maybe, he finally got to hear Jesse's voice for the first time. Not in his head, not in his imagination, but real, answering back, saying the words Elvis had been waiting 42 years to hear. "It's okay, brother. You did enough. You can rest now." The story of Elvis and Jesse is a story of love, loss, and the unbearable weight of survival. It's a story that asks the hardest question any of us can face. What do we owe to the people who didn't get the chance to live? And the answer, if there is one, is simple. We owe them our honesty, our vulnerability, our willingness to admit that life is hard and survival comes with a price. Elvis paid that price every single day of his life. And in the end, maybe that's what made him not just a star, but a human being. Flawed, broken, haunted, but real. So the next time you listen to an Elvis song, or see a photo of him on stage, or visit Graceland and walk through the meditation garden, remember this: you're not just seeing Elvis Presley. You're seeing two brothers, one who lived, one who didn't, one who became the king of rock and roll, and one who became the ghost he carried with him everywhere he went. And maybe, in some way, that's the most beautiful and tragic love story ever told. Not between Elvis and a woman, but between Elvis and the brother he never got to know. Jesse Garon Presley, born January 8, 1935, died January 8, 1935. Forever remembered, forever missed, forever with his twin. Tell us in the comments, have you ever faced a moment where you had to prove yourself or lose everything? What's the hardest comeback you've ever made? Do you think the pressure of fame is worth the glory? Let us know what city you're watching from today. Subscribe to our channel for more untold stories of Elvis Presley, the moments that tested him, and the performances that defined him. Hit the bell to never miss a story that matters.